Good evening, everybody. My name is E.R. Anderson. I'm the executive director of Charis Circle. Charis Circle is a nonprofit programming arm of Charis Books, and Charis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. We are so excited to welcome Sharon Bridgforth in conversation with Marianne Adams for Old Home Week celebration of our fictional friend Bull Jean. So we're here. It feels like it's wild that the Bull Jean stories were first published by RedBone Press in 1998. It was Lambda Literary Award-winning when it first came out and chronicled the course of love returning in the lifetimes of Bulldog Jean. So tonight's event is co-hosted by ZAMI NOBLA, the National Organization of Black Lesbians on Aging. And we are here with Marianne Adams, who's the founder and executive director of ZAMI NOBLA. She founded the Audre Lorde Scholarship Fund, which awarded $250,000 in scholarships to LGBTQ scholars of color. She has been honored by the National Center for Human Rights Education, Atlanta Coalition of 100 Black Women, Women Healing Women, Unity Fellowship Church of Atlanta, and named 100 most influential LGBTQ plus Georgians by Out Georgia, and by Go Magazine 100 Women We Love, class of 2022. A 16-year breast cancer survivor, she serves as an advisory board member at Emory University Winship Cancer Institute. Marianne also serves on Atlanta Mayor's LGBTQ Advisory Board and the Wharton Lab Rise Advisory Board, and is a commissioner and board chair of the East Point Housing Authority. She received a master's in social work from Georgia State University. So welcome, Marianne. We're so glad you're here. And the person of the hour tonight is Sharon Bridgforth, a 2022 winner of Yale's Wyndham Campbell Prize in Drama. Sharon is the 2020 to 2023 Playwrights Center Core member, a 2022 to 2023 McKnight National Fellow, and a New Dramatists alumni. She has received support from the Doris Duke Performing Artist Award, Creative Capital, MAP Fund, and the National Performance Network. Her work is featured in Teaching Black, The Craft of Teaching on Black Life and Literature, Mouths of Pain, an anthology of Black lesbian thought, and Feminist Studies, Volume 48, Number 1, honoring 40 years of this bridge called my back, and But Some of Us Are Brave. Sharon has the privilege of benefiting from support from the ZAMI NOBLA and Charis Books communities since 1998, when she first toured with the RedBone Press edition of the Bull Jean stories. In her new book, Bull Jean and Dim Day Back, from 53rd State Press, Bull Jean returns in 2 performance novels, both which will be produced as main stage productions at Pillsbury House Plus Theater in Minneapolis, Minnesota in 2023. So welcome, Sharon. This is such an honor. I was saying in the green room how this feels like a perfect way to close out December, to celebrate the holidays. We always like to sort of wind up the year with something that just feels celebratory and joyful, and this hits the spot. So glad y'all are here. Welcome to everybody watching at home. You can ask questions at any time, and Marianne will pull them in as she sees fit. But I'm going to go ahead and get out of the way because I am so excited to listen to the two of you have this conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ER. It's always an honor to partner with Charis, and certainly tonight. It is absolutely a pleasure to be here with Sharon Bridgforth. Sharon, I want to say thank you. Thank you for saying yes to this conversation. Thank you for your heart. You already know how excited I am that Bull Jean is back. And she's actually excited too, Sharon, for this conversation because she's in the room tonight. I feel her energy everywhere, but more about her later. First, let me say that I am a fan of your podcast, Who Your People Is, a podcast that centers the stories of Black women, women of color, and LGBTQ folk. And I know you begin your podcast by posing the question to your guests, who your people is. I'm going to flip the script tonight, Sharon, and begin this conversation by asking you the same question. Who your people is.
Oh, man. Thank you. Well, first of all, and this is part of my response to that question. You, my people. I am so grateful to be here. It is such a privilege to have long-term ongoing support from you, from ZAMI NOBLA, from Charis Books and More, from the communities around the country that are with us right now. But for me and Bulgine to return and sit with you is really a privilege. And honestly, the work you do in the world is so important. I am so grateful. And so anything you ask, as long as the schedule ain't in the way, it's a yes. And I know I'm gonna benefit.
Thank you.
So thank you. I appreciate it. You know, my people, oh wow. My people is like raucous, cussing, or swaggerish, many-gendered, southerners, folk that move around and are part of a global experience. My people are people who are determined to love. And love to me is not easy. It's a messy experience. So I think I feel close to people that are willing to put love first and follow it through the murk and the mire with good intentions and with work. Those are my people.
And lovely people they are.
Thank you.
You know, I grew up in North Mississippi in Oxford, about 61 miles northwest to Memphis. And Memphis was the big city when I was growing up. It was like New York City to us.
Yeah.
And I have many, many relatives still in Memphis. The first time I actually heard your work, I knew you had grown up in South Central LA, but your characters felt so familiar to me. They felt so Black Southern. They felt so Memphis, you know, and you have a wealth of lived experiences that informs your work. And we certainly don't have enough time to go into the depth and breadth of your work tonight. But I want to spend a few minutes just teasing out that Black Southern sensibility that I see as a thread throughout all of your work. And you speak so lovingly about your family's legacy as storytellers. Can you speak to us about how that emergence growing up in that Southern culture of Memphis influenced you as a storyteller?
Thank you so much. I treasure that question. It means a lot to me. It means everything to me. Yeah, I'm from South Central LA, but, you know, I'm 64. So I'm of a generation where, you know, pretty much everybody, like so many of us were actually from other places. And the way the migrations work, people were following family, they were following train lines, they were following work, they were following extended family. And so Memphis was actually off the usual line but what had happened was, my mom's people, so I was raised by a single parent. My dad and my stepmom are from New Orleans, and I kind of grew into that part of my writing self later, after the Bulgine stories, after 1998. But the Bulgine stories landed me in what I call my writing voice, because I was essentially grieving the loss of the elders on my mom's side of the family, the ones from Memphis that I grew up with. And I just wanted to hear them again and feel them and be with them. And they would not have told me these stories, and they didn't even necessarily literally talk the way that I write, but they really were with me. And so writing the Bulgine stories landed me in my heart voice, which I consider a blues voice. And so on my mom's side, they were from Arkansas, Mississippi, and then they moved to Memphis. And then I was actually born in Chicago, but it's a long story. We ended up in LA because my mom's uncle lived in LA, and my mom hated the cold. And so South Central LA that I grew up in, people were not only from the South, they were from particular parts of the South. And then LA being such a big city, and during those, it's still segregated, but it was more segregated than it is now. And so you had pockets, you know, and so there were people from the diaspora from different places. There were Latinx communities from different places. There were Jewish communities, there were Asian communities. People were spread out. And thankfully, I had to take the bus a lot of places, and I got to go in and out of a lot of neighborhoods. But South Central anchored me.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
So who do you write for, Sharon? Who is your audience?
I didn't start sharing my work until I was 30. And I only shared it because my mentors, who were activists, they were artists who used art as a vehicle for social justice. And we were doing a lot of activism around HIV and AIDS. Back in the day, I had moved to Austin, Texas by this time. And when they found out I had these suitcases of writing, they literally made me share the work. And then my whole spirit, my life purpose, everything just synced up. I was like, oh, this is who I am. This is what I'm here to do. This is the biggest service I can offer. Even, I knew I didn't know what I was doing or quite where I was heading or how, but something deeply, deeply synced up inside of me and pushed me forward. So all that to say that before that, my practice was really to write as a way to breathe, to heal my own self, to hear and feel and reach for love of ancestors, love that I felt missing in my life, So, and I think it's really, I'm grateful I actually didn't have a lot of training because it's my own imagination. And I just aspired to tell stories as good as my family, because they're really, Black people, we're good at telling stories. So it kind of freed me in a way. And then later in life, I saw For Colored Girls and I met my mentors and I figured out what the heck I was doing. But yeah, I think I write from what one of my mentors, Lori Carlos, calls the bone marrow, to heal my own self. But what I know, because I've been in service for so long, is that it ain't about me at the end of the day. So it gives me courage to go deep and to be brave and to just try, even when I don't know what I'm doing.
So I'm curious and I'm nosy. What were some of the themes that you were writing about? What was in that suitcase that they cajoled you to pull those writings out? What was in there?
It was a lot of poems. I thought I was a poet. I don't think I'm a poet anymore. I think I aspire, I have a heart that breaks like a poet's, but I don't identify as a poet anymore. But I thought I was a poet. So I had a lot of poems, and they were poems about heartbreak, basically, because a lot of what I was processing was feeling essentially really troubled in my own body. What I now know is because, gender, I still don't quite have a name for what I feel my gender to be, but I'm being called a girl and I didn't feel like a girl. And then I had crushes on girls and I had no models, no language. I hadn't discovered the books yet that would help me. I didn't know what to do with it. So it was a lot of like heartbreaky kind of things. And then by the time I got to Austin, Texas, and I was in my 30s, I had written these series of poems that it became the first piece of mine that was performed called Sonata Blue. But it was just like looking at growing up in LA, being part of what I'll now say is the great African-American migration and being queer.
Since you raised this issue about gender, let's unpack that a bit before we talk about Bull Jean. I've seen you reference yourself as a multi-gendered mermaid. And for those in our audience who perhaps has not heard that, I haven't heard you identify that way, or I have not heard you identify as a mermaid, can you talk a bit about what you mean by that?
Yeah, I feel a deep spiritual connection with the ocean from as long as I can remember, and then literally through connections with Yoruba spiritual cosmology. So Yamaya, the ocean, feels very much like part of my soul, spirit journey, learning, practice, support, understanding, protection. And Yamaya is the top and Olokun is the bottom. And I think, originally I don't think, from what I know, pronouns were not, pronouns came with colonization and all those complications. And so there's a way that the mermaid feels truly like a part of me and powerfully freer than I've ever been or know how to be. And so it was actually a young gender nonconforming person who I was in a conversation with, and I was saying, I don't know how to name myself because, again, I came up at a different time. There was far less language. Yes. So I was called Butch for a long time, but that actually never felt right to me. I explored it, and I explored it partially through Bulgine, who is Butch. But I never felt quite like it fit, but it was close, so I wore it. And so we were having this conversation, and they said to me, "You're a mermaid," and I was like, "Yes, that's it." So it feels deeply personal. It feels mystical. I know that in some indigenous cultures in different parts of the globe, there are hundreds of words for gender, for pronouns, and so it's my preferred. I'm also starting to use they now, and she.
Do you see mermaid as something that might be fluid for you?
Yeah, both and this and that, all of it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think mermaids fly.
That's very fly. I love it.
No, I think mermaids fly.
Oh, fly. Well, they fly and it's fly. Okay.
Thank you. I will take all of that. Yeah.
So ER mentioned that in 1998 that Lisa Moore published, who's the RedBone publisher, published the Bulgine stories. And so we were able at that time to journey with Bulldog Jean, yes. A butch-loving woman in the 1920s. And we were able to journey with Bulgine through her loves and her resistances and her evolution. And I guess what I'm curious about is first I want you to read a couple of paragraphs on page 9.
Okay. From the new one or from the original one?
From the new one.
Okay. All right. Let me find my glasses.
Okay.
Page 9?
Yes. From the preface.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Just read like the first 2 paragraphs?
Yes, please.
Okay. I began writing the Bulgine stories in the 90s after the last of my elders on my mom's side passed. I wanted to hear their voices again, so I started writing in the ways that awakened their raucous, holy, tender, loving, self-determining spirits in me. In doing this, I developed a writing practice based in listening, feeling, and receiving with my essence. Bulgine carried me into my writer's voice. She carried me to my blues-based theatrical jazz self. She exposed and helped me release my unhealthy method writing tendencies, and she is the reason I grew through some serious life issues. Now in 2022, as I face my mother's mortality, as we all grieve and bear witness to loss, as this dysfunctional world shows its nasty ass, and as the truths that my queer Black ancestors have long been reckoning with turn this mother out, Bulgine has returned. This time she is coming with her posse of southern-Black-butch-sheroes, old folk tricksters, that Black mermaid man lady who first appeared in my show that premiered in 2018, and children that fly. Bulgine and them here to root the narrator in love, to ensure that the narrator knows how to expand their capacity to hold and feel everything that this time in life is offering. They here, in all their queer, splendored, many-gendered Black forms, from all sides the veil to wake us open free.
Mm. So I'm going to exhale on that because it's beautiful.
Thank you.
So, what a time in our history for Bull Jean to reemerge, a Bull Jean that rarely speaks. And I'll ask the question that probably is on everybody's mind. Where has Bull Jean been for the last 24 years, Sharon? And how did she make the decision to disturb her peace, to reemerge during the pandemic, during this chaotic time? And why did she bring them and they with her?
Thank you. Now, so I'm excited to share this. Part of how she got back is you opened a portal. So was that 2014 when we were having dinner?
It was 2017.
2017. So Bull Jean, you know, the original Bull Jean was published in 1998. And after Bull Jean settled inside of me, you know, after we were out in the world with the piece and I had experience, I could not get Bull Jean to talk to me anymore. Like I literally tried and she was so quiet. So I guess she was somewhere chilling and things and what. And writing her originally, the thing that it helped me, one of the things that it helped me do was to release a pattern that I had of going after unrequited love. Mm. So, you know, which she does in the first part of the book. And so I kind of wrote my way through a healing that I really, really needed in my own life so that I could stay sober, so that I could really receive the love that I wanted romantically, and so that I could be more of who I intended and really desired and wanted to be in the world, available to be of service and to just, you know, live fully. So she really, really helped me with that. And then she got so quiet. I guess she said, "You all right? Go on now with yourself." And so we were having dinner and you said to me, "Where is Bull Jean?" And I said, "I don't know. I don't know what she said. I can't get her to talk to me." And then you said, "You know, she's old now." And I was like, yeah. And something about that. And you said, more or less, to paraphrase, you said you need to write.
Yes.
Yeah, you need to bring her back. You need to write. And it took me a while. It took me some years, actually. But I think what that did was it opened a portal. And as I started, my mom is 85. Mm-hmm. She has early dementia. Mm-hmm. It's a lot.
Yes.
And with the lot that we are all globally dealing with, and with all the, you know, like the constant bombardment of just like crushing emotions and crushing things that are happening, and loss and beauty and possibility, it's a lot to hold. And so I think Bull Jean came back through to expand my container so that I can hold more, so that I can fully feel and be present for the journey with all its weight, its magic, its levity, and so that I could live my answered prayer, which is to receive love, be love, and be joyful. Mm-hmm. So I feel like joy is the evidence of spirituality, and that's a lot of damn work, I'm gonna tell you. But I think she came back through. So there are things that she was then holding as an elder, losses that she was holding as somebody who had loved so much in her life that it's weird. I didn't even understand until the end of completing a good draft of the new piece, which is called Bull Jean We Wake, that I was actually once again healing myself. I just kind of open and listen and work, and then I have folks that help me, that listen to me or read things back to me or whatever. And it wasn't until I had finished a good draft that I was like, oh, I needed that. That was for
Mm. Mm. So why did she bring them and they with her?
Because I think they are always with us.
Mm.
I think with the practice of a spiritual, following spiritual impulse,
Mm-hmm.
and I think there's lots of ways to do that. I think some people follow it by looking at birds. Some people follow it by hugging their pets. Some people follow it by kneeling in church. But by following spiritual impulses, we're more available to the them and they that are always with us. And I do believe, and I have for a long time, believed that the past, the present, the future, the living, the dead, the unborn coexist, and they're all here. I'm so much, I learned so much from some of my relatives that have passed now that they are on the other side. I'm learning so much from them, stuff that I couldn't perceive when they were alive, or maybe I wasn't mature enough, or maybe my conversation with them is different. So I think the them and the they, all of them, like it's reality actually.
Yes, yes. So when you first introduced Bull Jean to audiences all over this country, all over the world, I'm sure, as a traveling artist, Bull Jean was unlike, and for me, Bull Jean is a living, breathing being. I mean, that's who she is.
Me too. Yeah, me too.
So she was unlike anyone that a lot of women had never met Bull Jean before. She was in your face. She was vibrant. She was alive. She was real butch. She was like a stone butch in your face. She was cussing. She was drinking. She was doing all these things. And in 1998, it was a very different country. Let's talk about Atlanta. There were so many folks who were closeted, who were unsaved, who felt unsafe, who dared not speak aloud their sexuality, who they loved. They couldn't show that out in public. I mean, there was so much going on. And then Bull Jean stomped into the room. And it took our breath away. And now you really gave a lot of voice and visibility to folk during that time, Sharon. And I'm wondering, during those last 24 years, and now that Bull Jean has reemerged, how do we bridge that gap, particularly bringing in a younger audience to experience Bull Jean? Folk who don't know your work, who don't know about her. I know hopefully you're going to be traveling with this new work. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So in addition to these kinds of venues, traveling with the work, do you have any other ways that you're thinking about to help people engage this work, particularly a younger generation?
Thank you so much. Thank you for all of that.
Mm-hmm.
I must, well, first of all, I want to thank Lisa Seymour, mother of the House of RedBone Press, and Kate Kremer, who is mother of the House of 53rd State Press, both of whom are courageous and loving, hardworking, generous, mighty, mighty human beings, making space for so many of us. And I think part of what I want to say is, that work that I was doing, that activist work in Austin, I was hearing a lot of people's personal stories around their sexuality. I was managing cases for this, managing syphilis cases for the health department. And then I was doing early intervention HIV work, outreach, testing. So I was hearing a lot about sexuality. And also I was seeing a pattern that a lot of the gatekeepers of information, like people who knew where you could go find people, were basically Black bulldaggers. They were just a lot of lesbians who were part of the church, part of the community or whatever. They live over there with Miss So-and-so, and that's who you had to go talk to get information. And recognizing that freed me. to imagine Bulgine because I knew she existed.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of research, I knew she existed. I knew we were there, even though it was not easy visibility and, it, you know, still dangerous, but dangerous. Anyway, yeah, it was very different, very
Mm-hmm.
different. And I'm so grateful for the journey. One of the ways that the work will live now, so Pillsbury House Theater in Minneapolis has devoted basically a season to Bulgine. So in October, my wife, Dr. Omio Shun Joni L. Jones, performed an excerpt from the Bulgine stories as a staged reading. In January, there's going to be a full production with a performer named Amy K. Bryant of the full piece, the Bulgine stories. And then in June, Daniel Alexander Jones is going to create, I think might be a better word, a performance installation of Bulgine We Wake. And it will feature both Omi and Amy, but it will be very interactive. And there will be invitations for people to touch, share, shape the experience, be in conversation with the work through their own stories. And we will mindfully and intentionally make sure it's intergenerational. And then we'll see how, once we know more, because we're still discovering what that all is going to look like, then we'll see how we can take it out in the world. But I imagine moving around more like, you know, an engaged activity with the work. And I'm working with Alexis Pauline Gumbs too, who's the genius helping me think this all through. So I'll know more later.
Okay.
But that's what I know right now. And what I've noticed in terms of also these intergenerational conversations or ways of engaging, they have so much to teach us.
Mm-hmm.
They know so much more, I feel, than I do. They got so much more language, authority,
Mm-hmm.
and when they listen, I can offer what I know.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I step into it all with a sense of curiosity, wonder, and excitement.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what we need. We need
Mm-hmm.
in order to ensure flourishing conversations and connection.
You know, your work has always been very collaborative.
Yeah.
And I'm struck by a couple of things. I'm struck by the fact that I know from time to time you do work with your wife and your daughter. So I'm wondering what that's like, you know, working with family. And also the fact that how is it that you're able to essentially take something that you've birthed essentially and allow other people to put their hands on it, to mold it and pull it and push it. What is that like? One of the things that always struck me about you early on, and we engaged with a lot of artists over the years, is how much you were able to put your ego aside. I was always really struck by that. You know, by your grace. I remember once we had something featuring you and other folk were featuring themselves. And I had to say, Sharon, go on stage. But you were content because you knew who you were. I was always struck by that. So I'm really struck by the fact that I know your work is collaborative, but you know, you're inviting people. It's a very interactive work. You're inviting people from the audience to essentially add to, subtract, and also I would like for you to tell the audience a bit about how that process works, because I'm very curious about it.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So my wife Omi has written the book. It's called Theatrical Jazz: Performance, Ashe, and the Power of the Present Moment. And it really is the book that goes into great detail about the artistic lineage that I'm a part of. But what I will say, and just speaking about my own work and process in response to the question, the invitation, is so, you know, I'm trying to tell stories like my family. People talking at the same time, somebody dancing, somebody singing, somebody, you know, you find out later cousin so-and-so lies, you know, it's like I just have this feeling of pork chops sizzling. Like I just can't get that out of my ear, you know, so food's smelling and sizzling and all that. And so, you know, it's the makings of jazz. So polyrhythm, dissonance, simultaneity, you know, so these are artistic things, but, you know, it's a Black form and, you know, it roots. And so my great joy and like heart's desire is to use the page as a canvas to hold a language that is Black music. But I don't want to tell people how to play the song. I want them to bring their own selves. So I collaborate with actors, singers, dancers, musicians, designers, audiences. And in terms of artistic collaborators, I'm actually very careful. So I turn it over to people I trust. So people, and some of them I've been like, we're family, you know, like Alexander Jones, he's my soul brother. We've worked together since I think 1994. Omi and I have, my wife, we've worked together since 1990. My daughter grew up on the stage. She used to sweep the stage, sell the t-shirts. I said to Sandra Parks, the actor who I've worked with the longest, I said, Sandra, I'm gonna find you in a closet locked up. This girl knows your lines. I said, be careful. But, you know, so there are a lot of people that I have long relationships that we have nurtured, and we don't necessarily work officially together in everything, but we talk all the time.
Sure.
And we work through everything together. So that Pillsbury House Theater, that is my home place. I get to go there. I'm asked, what do I want to do? You know, that's a precious question.
Yes.
So that net of trust and of connection is what holds it all. And then with the audiences, I know the audiences, they got that juice and that fire. I'm curious. So I think what I desire most within the container of trust is what other people know that I don't know, what they hear that I haven't imagined yet, how they gonna bring it to life in ways that are beyond my mind's capacity. And it's interesting with this book. So I know the Bull Jean stories really well because I've lived with it for so long, but We Wake, honestly, I don't know it very well because I haven't played with it with others yet. So in July, I'll be able to talk about it a lot more than I'm able to talk concretely about it now, because by then we will have been in a process. So I'm excited to learn. I'll just say this, Alexis Pauline Gumbs, who was a dramaturg for That Black Mermaid Man Lady, the show, which Pillsbury House Theater produced in 2018 and Ebony Golden directed. The first day of rehearsal, Alexis hands me 75 questions and I started crying. I said, oh, Jesus. We're not questioning the work. The questions were reflections of what she saw and she knew and what she knew me to be trying to do. That's like gifts.
75. Wow.
Yes. That's gifts. So, yeah.
Yes, yes. Would you read something for us now?
Sure.
From whichever work you'd like.
Okay. Okay, this is the very end of Bull Jean We Wake. And part of why I want to read it is because it connects with the journey that I am in with my aging parent. So I had 6 parents. There are 3 still alive. So my mom, my stepdad, and my stepmom are still alive. My blood father and my daughter's father's parents, who were like my parents, have all passed. But anyway, with my mom, who's the one that I've had the most complex relationship with, and who I have finally learned how to be who I want to be in the world with her,
Mm-hmm.
to be loving, to be playful, to be joyful. It's taken quite a bit, but I've learned how to do that. And so I'm able to show up and support her. And so this is the end of the book. It is also the very beginning of the next thing that I'm writing. Ooh. And they rose, up, up, up. They rose, smiling, smiling, smiling. Ga 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 ga, ga 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 ga. Running and laughing and skipping and fanning and tumbling. Flick, wave, circle, drop, clap, twirl. Play, call, pray. Flick, wave, circle, drop, clap, twirl. Play, call, pray. They rose, waving, smiling, never leaving. They rose, carrying you to me. 1. May all the courage that you have so desperately walked with circle back and strengthen your next steps. May every act of self-determination that you have enacted return as divine defiance lighting your way. May all the laughter that you have poured into gatherings spill back into your bones and move you to dance. May your unrequited curiosities, your deep down dreams, every bit of never returned love, each yearning, all your longings, may they show themselves to you unfurled and loose and light. May regret and grief and shame ungrip your spirit. May you be healed in all directions of time. May you break the bondage of cycles that cause harm. May you soar in new possibilities. May the stars blanket your return within and beyond the veils. May love become you. May you welcome, walk with, and witness those becoming. May you be free. Remember, we wake.
Wow. So you mentioned earlier that for a long time, the Blue Jean would not speak to you. And when she did start speaking, did she start speaking and didn't stop? I'm wondering what this writing process was like for you. Because I think that it might be instructive and informative for us to hear about this. And how long did it take once you started, from the time you put pen to paper until you got the publisher? And how did you get the publisher for this? Can you talk a bit about that process?
Yeah, I think understanding one's writing process is really helpful, because if you understand your writing process, or even if you're questioning, curious about what it is, you can accelerate making writing happen.
Mm.
I know, and this is what happened here, I'm slow. It takes me a long time. And so I start with a feeling, like I think that feeling burst open in our dinner conversation, but I think it was a few years before I wrote anything. But there is a feeling. And so I find music, books, documentaries, things like that, and conversations to feed the feeling. And it became clear to me around 2000, probably 2018, that it had to do with grief, because my mom broke her neck. She broke two plates. And thankfully, I followed my spirit. Omi and I were living in San Francisco, and Omi said to me, let's move to LA. And I was like, yeah, let's move to LA, because I want to be home before there is an emergency. And so we were here, we were settled. She broke her neck, and I was able to be with her. Now she's totally released from that situation. She doesn't wear a neck brace anymore. She's doing well, but it was a 2-year process. And so grief, I was able to name, and it was probably even being afraid of grief. And then little by little, I get these little lines or words or little bits. And so I collect bits and put them somewhere where I can find them. Because if I can't find them, I go crazy. So, it's just, I just need to be able to find them. But I kind of collect things as they come. And then I knew that I knew Bull Jean was starting to talk. And I knew that I was writing a new Bull Jean piece, but I didn't know what it wanted other than grief. I didn't know what it was about. And luckily, so I received a Playwright Center core membership, and part of that includes is support to develop work. And it was during the pandemic, and they were very flexible. So what they did was they let me just, like, I used the funds to go to a local boutique hotel or to a local Airbnb. So about 4 times I kind of just went away. And through Zoom met with Daniel. My daughter was a dramaturg, Omi, through Zoom. And I just kind of cried, basically, sat with the work and cried, and had people that checked on me and asked me questions. And eventually I had a nice little draft. And so the next part of the process for me is to hear the draft. And so Pillsbury House Theater and the Playwright Center helped to make a gathering possible where Issa Davis was the performer, and Daniel Alexander Jones was the director, and my daughter and Omi were the dramaturgs, and Signe Haraday as the presenter was present. And so I got to hear the piece, and I got to hear them talk about it. And then I went back in and finished it. I talked to Alexis a couple of times, and Celeste Henry, who's a brilliant scholar, talked to her about the piece. She gave me feedback. And then 53rd State Press had published Daniel's work. And he said to me, you should talk to Kate. And so, and Lisa Moore and I talked, and she was like, yeah, talk to Kate. So I talked to Kate, and Kate welcomed me in as family.
She's lovely.
And just incredible. And she and her team have such good eyes. Like Lisa Moore, what they were looking for were ways to help me follow my own rules, because I use the page in a lot of different kinds of ways. So I felt very supported. And so now I'll get to be part of a larger sit down, kind of sit in it process where I'll learn some more. But the writing is done.
And what's going to be the process for taking this work out into the world? So, for example, like coming to Atlanta, Georgia, because you must come to Atlanta, Georgia. So are you going to partner with community-based organizations or, academic spaces? I mean, is that going to look much like it looked when you were touring with Bull Jean initially?
I think I have to discover what it will look like. Initially, I was very much, with Bull Jean, Lisa Moore did all that.
Okay.
So Lisa Moore put together the book tour, and we went to like almost 40 different places.
Wow.
But as someone who has been a touring artist, I've been a self-employed touring artist since 1998. And so with my performance pieces, I am used to producing or co-producing, and I have done a lot of that. I don't know that I have so much energy for that right now. So I think, one, I'm looking for invitations. I'm looking for people that I can say, hey, I want to do this. And they meet me, and then once we, in addition to that, once we finish presenting the installation in June, and I see what it is, then I'll know how to carry it out in the world. And I think it might be a combination of invitation and then me doing some work as well. And, having little, I have received some grants that I have little buckets, and I say, oh, I got this bucket. Can I come? So I think like that.
Will any of this work be digital? Is that a possibility?
That is a dream. I have always, the Bull Jean Stories is a, CD. me reading Deacon John, the legendary jump blues musician who's Lisa Moore's father, plays the guitar. And actually my daughter, who was in high school at the time, is a singer.
Mm-hmm.
I dream of all my pieces being digitized. I hear them for me, they live in lots of different kinds of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Ways that I think the work should live sonically, I have less of.
Mm-hmm.
So with We Wake, it is a heart's desire to have it live as a sonic experience. And that is something that I will pursue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I am aware that we're almost out of time. I invite anyone in the audience to ask questions in the chat. I have a couple of more questions and I'm trying to decide which one because I know we're almost out of time. So I'll just park this question for next time. But I'm really curious, as someone who identifies as a multi-gendered mermaid working as an independent creative, for so many years, how you've been able to really sustain yourself. You've not had to go out and do a traditional 9-to-5 job. And I mean, it's just absolutely amazing what you've been able to do with your genius and your brilliance to sustain yourself for 24 years, essentially. And really, I'm curious about the highs and the lows of that, but that's not my question. There's just something for next time.
Okay. Yeah, because there's lots to talk about there.
Lots to talk about. So before she transitioned, in an interview with a friend, Toni Morrison was asked, now that she's in her 80s, what are things that she gets to say? He said, what are 3 things you get to say now that you're in your 80s? And she said, 1 is no. The other is shut up. And the 3rd is get out.
I love all of that.
So now that you're 64, what are the 3 things you get to say?
I'm going to sleep. So basically, don't call my ass after 8. I feel like yes is something I get to say now more than I used to. Yes, in the internal, big, playful, joyful way. And I feel like I get to say what I see. So I have a lot of, I was taught, I was trained up, I was claimed and loved by people that nurtured long-term ongoing relationships. And that's what I do in honor of and because of the way I was trained. And so I have a lot of folk that are much younger than me that I've been in conversation with for a long time. And I will just tell them all of it. I will just tell them all of it. To talk my ass off and tell the truth. And I like to call on Jesus sometimes.
Because when you...
Yeah, but
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I went off on a tangent. Go ahead.
No, because when you get to be a certain age, you get to be able to say those things, correct?
Yes.
I don't.
Well, that's still, hey man, I love it. Okay.
I don't. Are there any questions? Is there? Okay, wait. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Here's a question. Will you please talk more about them, they pronouns? My friend uses them, they pronouns among Black people. I did not realize the deeper Black cultural meaning of they, them pronouns until I saw your book.
Yeah. So this is them, D-E-M, they, D-E-Y, which is for me a blues articulation, a play with meaning, a play with a rhythm, and a spiritual naming, they, them. And I think for me, it is situating, like Toni Morrison in her essay, I think it's called The Ancestors Archive. She talks about the I as we. It is a sitting inside of the reality that there is always we. So for me, the they, them is a signifier of that. And also, like, for me, blues language, I think of blues writers like Langston Hughes. I think of the way my mom talks. The short words and the self-determining spelling is part of Black brilliance. So we know how to shape shift a thing, and you know what I'm talking about. So it's like that.
Who your people is.
That's it. That's it.
That's it. Well, Sharon, this has just been an absolute joy for me. It always is to be in space with you, to be in conversation. I love the fact that you listen and that you listened to me and you went and you spoke to Bull Jean and say you need to come on back out because these folks are missing you. They need you. You know, much of my work these days is rooted in elder justice, and particularly trying to develop a new paradigm around aging so that it's affirming and empowering. And so many in our community are afraid of that. So I'd like to bring Bull Jean into the room again for one last question. What would Bull Jean say to folk in our community who are afraid of aging? Because in this society, we don't revere aging. We demonize folk who are old. And I can understand why people are hesitant to take on that status, and they're afraid of that because there's nothing good at what they're in our country about aging. And so, because Bull Jean has so gracefully aged and has so much wisdom to drop, because she just dropped one last dime.
Oh boy, yeah. I think she would speak on the importance of being in the present moment, the importance of receiving, of being still, of knowing what you know, the importance of pouring in so that you have, because it's like you get what you put out in some way. Mm-hmm. So how are you going to pour in? And then how do you sit in enough stillness to receive what pours back to you? Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you know, rejecting what's real and what's happening, moving so fast that you're missing everything, you blink and you dead. You know, missed all of it. So love, breathe, and shine.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everyone.
I'd like to invite ER back into the room.
Coming back slowly here with my camera. All right. Thank y'all so much. This was so fun, and just again, Old Home Week. It's great to have. So I want to let folks know, if you do not have this new version, we want you to have it because it's necessary. So you can click this teal button at the bottom center of your screen. That will let you buy Bull Jean and Dim Day from Charis. It really does help us when you buy your event books from us. Also, we encourage you to request that your local public library carry this book because we want it to be accessible to more and more people. So it really does help when you do that. And finally, if you would like to support the work of Charis Circle, you can make a donation. Certainly towards the end of the year, it really does help us. Any amount helps. Thank you for considering doing that. And as always, we're going to be putting our event up on YouTube in just a few days. So if there's anybody who missed this that should have been in the room, do us a favor, send them the direct link. We want more and more folks to see this and share it. So again, Sharon, thank you so much for all your brilliance and just your spirit. It's a real honor to have you here. And Marianne, I always am so grateful for you being a part of our Atlanta community and our Charis community. Makes me very, very happy that we got to do this tonight.
Thank you, ER. Thank you, Sharon.
And thank you, Marianne, for writing the introduction.
It was my distinct pleasure to do that. You know that I was just totally ecstatic to do that.
Yes. So if we didn't say that clear enough, go read it for Mary Ann's introduction as well. Get it for that. All right, y'all. Good night.
Good night, everybody. Thank you all so much for coming.
Yes.